I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here together with Dr. Iris Freelander. And today we're going to talk about difficult people. All of us have the experience of dealing with difficult people. And in this program, we share with you ideas and concepts of confident living and how to apply metaphysical New Thought philosophy to your daily life. In New Thought philosophy, we talk so often about the fact that we live in our minds and not in the world. The way your mind and my mind operate determine the quality of our being, the quality of our life. And nowhere is that more evident than when we deal with difficult people. I don't think there's a single soul on planet Earth that hasn't had to deal with what they have perceived to be, at least, a difficult person. Isn't that true?
Isn't it true? And sometimes we just can't stand ourselves, so we're being the difficult one. And we know when we're being difficult, and we can consciously like tone it down and be nicer. But mostly it's that our perception of other people is that they are doing things they ought not to do, or not doing things they ought to do. And again, it's our perception, isn't it?
It is our perception. And then, of course, we have to deal with the reality that people are going to be difficult from time to time. And one of the things that we experience so often in counseling is that people are unhappy with other people, especially difficult people. And one of the places that I note that people come to us and talk to us a lot about is in the workplace.
Hmm.
And more often than not, it's my boss or a
Yeah.
coworker is a very difficult person. Of course, we do know in relationships there are difficult people. And then of course, as we talk to families, we also know that children are sometimes the difficult people. So it is across all ages. But I guess the beginning point is that we talk to our viewers about the importance of how it is we see other people
Hmm.
and the importance of how it is that we see the world. And for many people, they see the world and they see other people in general as being difficult. And I think that we need to address first the fact that we have to do or go through a process of self-examination and understand whether or not we see people routinely as difficult.
Hmm.
And if that's the case, then it is our image of other people and our perception of other people that is probably flawed, as opposed to the other people being difficult. Now, then we can talk in a few minutes also about the fact that there are some difficult people and how we can deal with them. But it is important for us to understand what we're seeing in other people, isn't it?
Yes, and sometimes we can just give ourselves a pep talk. And I used to have a friend whose children would bring tales of woe, and other people would be difficult. And her retort was sometimes not verbally, but always to herself. Always she would say it. Ask me if I care.
Mm.
And I think sometimes we can do that. We can silently, when someone is really getting off in a very difficult way, we can just say it to ourselves. And sometimes it's very insulting to say it to the other person, and it wouldn't be the wise thing to say. But if we say it to ourselves and mean it, then it makes a difference.
Mhm. Very important. And self-talk is very
Yes,
important. And we
yes.
need to build within ourselves the ability to respond to circumstances and situations and to talk within ourselves and to talk mentally.
Hmm. And there are those people who are just so difficult that we need to really prep ourselves before we see them sometimes, and because we know they're going to be difficult. And you're right, there are people who are simply difficult, but it's whether or not we allow them to reach us is up to us, and that's our choice.
Mhm. So often when we talk to people about difficult individuals and employ some of the techniques that we use in metaphysics to change the view, we find that people have a difficult time in changing their way of thinking. And that is often the case because we do need to, in some cases, change our way of thinking.
Mhm.
And when we deal with difficult people, often we have to deal with the reality that this is where we are. One of the things that, as we talk, for instance, to someone who is working with a difficult employer or a boss or supervisor, is that there are a couple of options. Of course, you can quit your job. And some people decide that, but there are other ways to change the way that that individual is behaving, not only in the workplace, but
Mhm.
any difficult person.
Mhm.
And it really comes from the projection or the creative power
Mhm.
that we have to influence the people around us and the power that we have to influence them through the thoughts that are emanating from us
Mhm.
that in many cases set the stage for what's going to happen. I think not it doesn't have to do with difficult people, but I was thinking of a lady who once said to me she really hated to go to parties because every party she went to, she had a terrible time. And as we talked further, the fact was that indeed she did have a terrible time every time she went to a party. But she went to the party with the mindset that she was going to have a terrible time. And guess what? She had a terrible time because thoughts make things. That's fundamental to what we teach. And since thoughts make things, we need to be cautious of what it is we are creating. And so if going back to the employer situation or the workplace situation, if we have someone with whom we work and we say, oh, that person is unreasonable, they're difficult. And I just hate, and I'm thinking of someone who just recently was talking to me about someone, and they said, I just hate to go to work every day. I really just, to the point that I have an upset stomach in the morning because I know what I have to face. And I go in and it's the same thing. She does this and she does that. Well, this individual was setting the stage every day, expecting it to happen. And it happened. And a part of that has to do with the fact that if that person created a different expectation, even if the behavior was the same or similar, the person's expectation and subsequent response is going to be different. Isn't that exciting?
Yes, it is. And I hope that those listening to us can put that into effect either in socially or in business and in their own personal lives.
And it's able to change the way that we perceive the circumstance and situation. We've talked in the past about the fact that we need to see beyond appearances. And we need to definitely, when we're dealing with difficult people, be able to see beyond the difficulty and definitely not project it. Because projection is that all-consuming thing that creates and becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a little bit like the fact that I'm going on vacation, I'm going to have a terrible time. And we do. And so that we have to be cautious of because these difficult people and difficult experiences continue to repeat themselves because we've set the stage for that to happen.
And we have to know that we are responsible for how we take other people. And I know that years ago I worked in a business office and a young girl who was working under my jurisdiction said, I hate to go back to the accounting office because the accounting manager keeps me there talking forever. And I said, just take your paperwork back and don't make eye contact, leave it, and say good morning or good afternoon, but don't make eye contact, and just leave it and go. And then I said, oh my, do I do that? And she says, good heavens, no, I'm glad to be able to tell you you're abrupt to the point of rudeness. And so it gave me something to think about. And she needed to have said that to me because it made her feel better, and I gave it a lot of thought. But it probably didn't change very much, but I gave it a lot of thought. And I asked my boss if he thought I was being abrupt to the point of rudeness, if he had observed it. If so, he should have let me know. And he said, well, you don't waste time. And that was a good point. But we have to know where other people are coming from, and sometimes they're just plain miserable. And if they are, then we have to know that that's why they're acting the way they do. And if we can analyze in our own mind why someone else is doing whatever it is that we think makes us uncomfortable, then usually we can come up with a fairly accurate answer, can't we?
We can. The other thing that we can do, and of course a part of what we talk about so often, is the integration of spirituality into daily living. And one of the things is the power of blessing. And that is, in many instances, we deal with difficult people, and we see them as difficult, we see them as enemies, we create within ourselves an adversarial relationship with them, we create self-fulfilling prophecies by expecting the same behavior, and very often we can employ the technique that we use in a lot of other areas of visualization, of visualizing and seeing them and the circumstance in a totally different way. And a part of that is the process of blessing the circumstance and situation and allowing it and them to behave in a different way. And when we do that, we create a different projection. We are projecting a positive, affirmative, and spiritual creative force into the environment, and it has potent power. Now, people will say that's hocus pocus or that's foolishness, but in fact, we know that it works, and we know that as we change our attitude about a person, we change the whole makeup of our being in response to that person, and change thereby the way that they feel and respond to us. And that can be done. And it can be done simply by changing our way of thinking and projecting that positive thought. In metaphysics, we talk a lot about vibration and the use of the vibratory power of thought. And that is an absolutely demonstrable fact. And of course, science is a ways from it, but we know from a spiritual and psychological standpoint that it exists. And a great example and demonstration of it is we've all experienced the fact of going into a house or into a room or meeting somebody that we immediately didn't like or didn't feel good about. And so we immediately, and what is it that we don't feel good about? What is it in the environment? We've all walked into a house and had a bad feeling, or walked into a room and felt this is not a good place, or met someone. That is the response to the vibratory rate or the vibration that is present in that environment, and our vibration is meeting that vibration. And so the reality is that we are constantly sending out vibrations, and we are sending out a sense of self, and others are perceiving that and responding to it. And by sending a positive vibration into an environment, we can change it.
And we do. There was the young vocalist at our church said to me one Sunday recently, "It's so nice sitting beside you on Sunday morning. I want to thank you for being so serene and calm, because it makes me serene and calm." And I thought that was nice that she picked up that energy and that vibration, and that's a good example of the vibration you're talking about.
Absolutely. She was feeling it.
Yes.
And she felt it from you.
Yes.
She felt it from the environment, but importantly, she was open and receptive to it.
Yes.
And was happy to have it. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some information that will allow you to continue your study of the ideas and concepts that we're sharing with you.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can reach it through confident living.
Before the break, we were talking about ways in which we could influence difficult people and difficult environments, and we talked a little bit about vibration. For a lot of people from a lot of different faith traditions, vibration is a totally foreign concept, isn't it? So maybe we ought to spend a few minutes talking about it.
Yes, well, everything has a force field. Each individual has a force field. And so whatever we're thinking goes out into our force field. This is putting it very in a very elementary way. But if we're feeling worried, then that goes out into our force field and people pick it up. Or if we're happy and serene, they pick it up, and so forth. So whatever we're feeling goes out, and that's true of the other people around us. And we can accept their force field and allow it to affect us, or we cannot. And the key is to not allow it to affect us. And we have to do our own affirmation and put our own light around ourselves without being judgmental. And the bottom line is to not be judgmental about other people, but just do our own work. And also, when we need to pray for others, but we don't pray for specifics for them unless they ask us to. We pray for their highest good. And if we pray for someone's highest good who's being really mean to us, we're not being sanctimonious. We're just praying for their highest good. So whatever's best for that person will help. That will help it to manifest.
And that's key, that when we have a difficult person, we are called to affirm them
Yes.
and to enfold them in a positive, affirmative, loving way, and pray or meditate or reflect upon their highest good.
Yeah.
And what we have to be cautious of is that we not direct, that we not become judgmental.
Yes.
And so often we're more than willing to judge this person and say they're short-tempered, or they're foolish, or they're this, or they're that, when in fact what we need to allow and what we want to promote is the concept of their highest and best good coming forth from their being. And that whatever difficulty they're facing and whatever negativity exists in their life and in their life experience may be eliminated and that they may become the radiant person that they really are, but
Yeah.
they're really masking at this point in
Masking
time.
it, yes. I saw that demonstrated recently at a meeting where one woman was giving a report, and another person at the meeting said, well, that's not the way it happened. And she ultimately called the first woman a liar and was being very judgmental and very vehement and very angry, extremely angry. And so the first woman stayed calm and peaceful. And I know that she was probably praying and attuning and affirming that she's a part of God, and so is the other woman. And saying, God, I don't know why she's in her own mind. I don't know why that woman is acting the way she is, but she must have reasons for it. But touch her gently and softly.
And that centering presence is something else that we talk a lot about, and again is different and maybe new to people from traditional Western spirituality. But the reality of centering oneself in a difficult circumstance or situation. And the example you gave is a great one, and it affirms the fact that vibration is real, and it affirms the fact that thought is real, and it affirms the fact that we can change our environment by the simple fact, and we all know and have been involved in situations like you just described, where one person comes in and begins a negative thought or says a negative thing, and then other people ascribe and ascend to that thought, and then the whole room becomes negative.
Yes.
The whole thought process changes,
Yeah.
and the negativity of the difficulty. But the centering, this dynamic of centering, is tremendously important, because if we're able to allow ourselves to be centered in the midst of conflict and strife, and this is a spiritual and psychological process, but and again, has nothing to do with faith tradition. Nobody has to change their church to do this. But if we can center ourselves in the midst of that circumstance and situation, we become a conduit for that centering presence of negating the things that are happening that are negative and bringing about a different manifestation. And most importantly, is we stay serene.
Yeah.
And we're able to respond. And we're able to respond to these people, these difficult people in circumstances and situations, in a very lucid and reasonable way. And in many cases, we can respond in abject silence. And that abject silence allows us to create within ourselves the centering presence that we talk about.
Yes.
Breathing is a real technique to bring us into that, isn't it?
Isn't that important? If we can just remember to breathe deeply, then it becomes a habit. And when we're in a crisis situation like that, we automatically do the deep breathing. And it makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it?
It does. And we all know the experience of people telling us to take a deep breath
Yes.
or count to 10. Great advice. We don't do it. Well, all that does is bring about a period of time when we can center ourselves.
Yeah.
And we don't get caught up in this difficult situation or this difficult person. We don't get caught up in that negative response. And when that happens, we have changed the entire environment for ourselves, and we begin to change it for all of those around us.
Yes, and it also has a physical effect on our own bodies. If we do the deep breathing, we're inhaling the oxygen and it's going through our body, and we're able then to be more calm. And people who become angry are tense. They're not breathing, practically not breathing. Isn't that true?
It is very true. And this connection of dealing with difficult people, dealing with circumstances and situations that bring us stress, causing us physical damage. And we, of course, know about the physical problems all the way from high blood pressure to ulcers, and although ulcers are now caused by bacteria, but the physical ailments that come about because of our emotional distress. And by eliminating this impact that difficult people have upon us, we can actually be healthier. We can be less stressed. We can be more productive. We can be absolutely centered. And we can be a conduit for creative empowerment for ourselves and those around us. And that's what we really want for ourselves and for everyone.
Yes. And when we're dealing with difficult people, we have to always remember to take care of ourselves first, to take care of our own emotions, to take care of our own energies that we're sending forth. And then the other person is responsible for their lives and their thoughts and their actions.
And that's difficult for many people, isn't it? To give up the fact that we don't control other people.
Yeah.
And in so many instances, we want to do that. And going back to the situation with a work relationship, we want that person to behave the way we think they ought to behave. We think they ought to behave. They ought to be nice to us. They ought to be good to us. They ought to not be stressful to us. But that gets into a realm over which we have no control and in which we have no business. And so what we need to do is to change the way that we respond.
Put
We need to
ourselves.
change ourselves. I need to change Mike. And that is really foreign to many of us, and it's especially foreign to us in the West. And from a spiritual standpoint in the West, it's totally foreign, because in the West, what we want to do is to impart our belief system upon everyone else. And that's not what metaphysics is about. That's not what New Thought is about. New Thought is about empowering individuals and creating within those individuals the ability to allow others to experience what they need to experience. That person that is difficult to deal with probably has high blood pressure and probably has physical ailments and probably has a lack of peace and stability in their life. That's their problem. And we can help them only to the extent that they wish to have our help. We can't change their behavior. And when we want to and believe that we can or should change their behavior, or that their behavior ought to be the way we think it should be, we're really getting into a situation that's making us like them.
And those facts work, whether it's in a personal family situation, socially, in business. It works everywhere, doesn't it?
It works everywhere, and it goes back to the core of what we talk about, and that is that the mind-body-spirit connection doesn't have to do with spirituality on this side and our work life on this side and our mental health on this side. It has to do with putting these things together, because we're whole persons and we're made up of mind, body, and spirit. And when we put those things together and balance those things, then good things happen. But if we're just dealing with the spiritual, or we're just dealing with the physical, or we're just dealing with the psychological, that's not going to solve the problems that most of us have. We need to put it all together. And that's exactly what we're talking about doing, putting it all together and dealing with the reality. Life is difficult. And isn't it grand that it's difficult? Because in its difficulty, it gives us the opportunity to demonstrate these simple principles that many of us know and many of us share, and allow us to go through the experience of life, not being touched and influenced so much. Certainly we're touched from time to time. Certainly we're hurt. Certainly people are difficult from time to time. But for the most part, we're positive and we're affirmative, and we're able to deal with life in a wonderful way. And the stress and the difficulty and the difficult people are there. They're a part of the landscape, but they're not a part of the damaging landscape that is going to hurt us. They're a part of the experience, and life is made up of experiences, and the way that we deal with those experiences is really the sum total of who and what we are.
And so if we have control of our own lives, our own emotions, our own thoughts, our own actions, then we have control of how people affect us, because they either do or they don't, according to what we receive and accept.
And we believe, of course, strongly in the fact that we connect our mind and thought process with divine mind. And that as we connect ourselves with divine mind, we then open to ourselves, and anyone has open to them, all of the solutions, all of the guidance, all of the direction, all of the awareness, all of the answers, all of the things that we need to have in life. And we're able to do it in a very practical way. And we're able to do it while we allow others to find their way as they choose or as they're led. But by our demonstration, we're able to share with people that through this philosophy and through this teaching, we are able to live an empowered, happy, centered, whole life. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be without difficulty, and it doesn't mean that difficult people are going to go away. And I have them, you have them, we all have difficult people. But what those difficult people and how those difficult people influence us makes all the difference.
Yes, and one of the big keys is to not be judgmental. If we're not judgmental of other people, they don't reach us that easily. And if we are tolerant that they have reasons for acting the way they do, and for not even trying to figure it out, but just accept that that's where they're coming from. And we don't know where they're coming from. We could rationalize for a year and still not know perhaps where someone else is coming from, because they're coming from their frame of reference, from their own inner hurts and grievances. And so how do we know? But if we're not judgmental toward them, then they're not able to reach us.
And if we're not judgmental about life.
Uh-huh.
You know, so many people judge life. They say, oh, I have more difficult people, or I have a bad relationship, or they judge life itself. And in reality, we don't need to judge anything. We just need to accept the way it is. This is the way it is. If you
Yeah.
have a difficult boss, you have a difficult boss. If you have a difficult relationship, you have a difficult relationship. If you have a health challenge, you have a health challenge. If you have a difficult issue with prosperity and you have some limit and lack in your life, that's the way it is. Now, what do you do about it? And there's so many wonderful things that we can do about it,
Yeah.
and so many empowering things that we can do to respond to the things that life calls us to do.
Yes, and one thing we can do is say, I am a child of God, and really feel it, feel that centeredness with Creator God. And also at the same time say, so-and-so, whoever's causing us pain, is a child of God. And truly see them in that light and know that they are. Makes a big difference. Makes a difference in our vibrations, the energies we send out.
And the challenge of metaphysical philosophy is to see the divine in the most undivine. And that's tremendously important for us to be able, despite the behavior of other people, to see beyond the appearance of their behavior, understanding that their behavior and their deeds have to do with something that's going on within them, and that they are a perfect, whole, and complete person, despite the way that they're behaving. And so we see them as the same as us, but they're somewhat more damaged at this point than we find ourselves. And because of that, we can wish for them the highest and the best in life, but they have to go their way and we have to go ours.
Yes, and to know that that person is working through their own problems for the good, and good will ensue.
That's the magnificence, is that in the end, good is all that is real, and good and only good.
Yes. And so we can, if we see the other person in the light in which they truly are, then how can we find great fault with them? How can we not have compassion for them? It's automatic, isn't it?
It's automatic, and we are then able to deal with difficult people effortlessly and in every day of our life. And the one thing that's sure is that each and every one of us are going to continue to have difficult people in our lives, and from time to time we too will be difficult people to others. So Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you concepts and ideas for confident living. We hope that you found this information useful and look forward to seeing you next time.
This program is a community outreach of Christ Church. Dr. Mike Costello speaks each Sunday morning at 11 a.m., and Dr. Iris Freelander speaks on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. at the church. On Sunday evenings at 6 p.m., there is a meditation and healing service. Come and join us. You will be warmly welcomed.